McIlroy.
And I'm Abbie Poole.
Each quarter, we look at what's happening in the marketplace, not so you can become an economist, but so you can become a better, more informed buyer.
I know most of us didn't go into public procurement because we wanted to follow commodity markets, but those markets have a funny way of showing up in our solicitations.
Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on NASPO's YouTube channel soon.
And please take the brief survey at the end of the webinar to receive your point 0.5 continuing education credits. Okay, let's begin.
In today's news, finished goods are becoming more expensive. Today's headline isn't about copper or aluminum or oil. It's about everything those commodities become.
That's a good point, Julia. Very few public procurement professionals buy raw aluminum, but we absolutely buy things made from aluminum, like vehicles, ladders, office furniture, traffic signs, and HVAC equipment. So when aluminum prices increase, eventually prices of those products increase as well.
This is actually the journey we're following today. The commodity itself isn't usually what we're buying, it's the finished product. And by the time the finished product reaches us, there are things like transportation costs and supplier margins layered on top.
One thing I found especially interesting in this quarter's Procurement IQ report is that we're no longer seeing isolated disruptions. Like Julia mentioned, we're seeing multiple market forces piling on at once. They include things like tariffs, labor shortages, energy costs, supply constraints, and a growing demand from AI. These forces are all interacting with each other and ultimately impacting our procurements.
So today's roadmap. After each commodity, we're going to stop and ask three simple questions. What's happening? Why should buyers care? And what's one thing buyers can do tomorrow? I want to start with something that affects nearly every public entity, transportation. Whether you're purchasing police vehicles, maintaining snowplows, buying dump trucks, or simply paying freight on office supplies, transportation has become significantly more expensive.
And the interesting thing is it's not just fuel, it's the trucks themselves. So why? Well, things like truck tariffs, higher freight cost, and higher fuel prices. This quarter's report highlights new tariffs on imported Class 3 through Class 8 trucks that are pushing new truck prices higher. At the same time, trucking companies are facing higher equipment costs, and those cost increases eventually show up in freight rates that are charged back to customers.
So even if your agency isn't buying a heavy duty truck this year, you're probably paying for one.
Yeah, that's right. Every pallet, every shipment, every piece of furniture, somebody must move it. And when transportation becomes more expensive, everything becomes more expensive. Up next is a list of the impacts of higher transportation costs of finished goods.
This is where procurement professionals should start thinking differently. It's easy to look at a truck tariff and think, that doesn't affect me because I'm not buying one, but it will affect nearly every solicitation you issue this year. Okay, it's time for our three questions. Abbie, what's happening?
Well, to start, transportation costs are rising, and they're embedded in everything we buy.
Why should buyers care?
Because freight is no longer just a shipping line item, it's becoming a cost multiplier. If you're budgeting for furniture, let's say, or playground equipment, building materials, or even your fleet, transportation costs deserve just as much attention as the product itself.
And what's one thing buyers can do tomorrow?
Well, I would encourage buyers to ask two additional questions during discussions with suppliers. First is how much of their pricing is transportation related? And how long are their freight rates guaranteed? You'll learn very quickly which suppliers have stable logistics and which are exposed to spot market volatility.
Let's move to one of the largest spending categories for many public agencies, construction and facilities. Whether you're building a new fire station, renovating a courthouse, replacing an HVAC system, or installing a new roof, you're probably noticing that projects are becoming more expensive and in many cases taking longer to complete.
And what's interesting is that there isn't just one reason. It's easy to say that lumber prices are up or steel prices have increased, but that's only one piece of the story. What we're really seeing is several market pressures piling on top of each other.
Abbie, this is what I like to call the perfect storm. Even if one commodity begins to stabilize, another cost driver takes its place.
Unfortunately, that's the reality for a lot of procurement offices. The Procurement IQ report points out that lumber supplies remain tight because of mill closures and tariffs on Canadian imports. Steel continues to face higher prices because of tariffs, and those tariffs have reduced competition and increased the reliance on domestic mills. And skilled labor shortages are extending project schedules and increasing contractor costs across many markets.
So thinking beyond buildings, I think this is an important point. When we hear construction, it's easy to picture a new building, but construction procurement is much broader than that.
Absolutely. Replacing an air handler, upgrading lighting, installing EV chargers, repairing sidewalks, building a maintenance garage. Those are all construction products, and they're all feeling the same market pressures.
Abbie, this might be my favorite slide. Why? Because buyers often focus on material prices only, but they're only one piece of the total project cost.
That's exactly right. A steel beam might cost more than it did 2 years ago, but the bigger issue may be finding someone available to fabricate that steel beam, deliver it, and install it on schedule.
Sometimes the greatest project risk isn't the price, it's the schedule.
I think that's becoming one of the biggest lessons in today's market. This quarter's report emphasizes that longer mill times, labor shortages, and tighter supplier capacities are increasing execution risk, not just material costs.
Okay, Abbie, let's do our 3 questions. What's happening?
Well, construction projects are becoming more complex, not just more expensive.
And why should buyers care?
Because today's projects involve multiple overlapping risks, right? You have material pricing, labor availability or lack thereof, transportation issues, supplier capacity, lead times. And if buyers are only evaluating one of those components, you're likely missing the bigger picture.
And what's one thing buyers can do tomorrow?
I'd encourage buyers to ask a question that doesn't always appear on the standard checklist. Which component of this project concerns you most right now? Contractors usually know where the bottleneck is. It might be the steel, it might be the lumber, it could be the electricians, it could be transformers. But the earlier you know, the easier it is to plan.
Abbie, I've noticed something interesting lately. A few years ago, buyers spent a lot of time comparing prices. Today, we're just as likely to compare lead times, supplier capability, project schedules, and financial stability. It's a great reminder that the lowest price doesn't help if the project can't be completed on time.
That's really, I think, the theme of today's discussion. Commodity markets don't just affect prices. They influence schedules, they influence competition, and ultimately, they influence whether critical public projects are delivered when communities need them most.
Abbie, you're so right. So far, we've talked about the buildings we construct, but now let's shift to something every procurement office buys regularly, technology. because the next time you're purchasing laptops, servers, or networking equipment, there's a good chance commodity markets are shaping those prices. When people hear the word commodity, technology probably isn't the first thing that comes to mind, but technology products are actually some of the most commodity-dependent purchases public agencies make.
That's right, Julia. A laptop isn't just software and some plastic. There's aluminum and copper. It's made up of semiconductors and memory components. There are rare gases used in the manufacturing process, and every one of those inputs has its own supply chain that we should consider.
So when one of your end users asks, why did this server cost 20% more than last year? The answer isn't usually one thing, it's several things happening at once.
Right, and that's really what the report highlights. Demand from AI infrastructure is increasing demand for semiconductors and memory components and electricity all at the same time.
Abbie, I love this graphic because it shows how one trend creates several others.
Right. AI isn't just increasing demand for servers. It's increasing demand for everything needed to build those servers. More chip manufacturing, more data centers, more cooling, more electricity.
The theme is definitely more. So AI is influencing procurement, even if your agency hasn't purchased it yet. Most agencies buy some of these every year, and many of them are becoming more difficult to budget for.
Right. The report notes that memory prices have increased dramatically as suppliers are prioritizing those high performance server memory components for AI workloads. So while consumers may notice more expensive laptops, it might be helpful to note that large institutional buyers purchasing hundreds of devices are also seeing those significant budget impacts. So we're spreading the wealth.
Abbie, that's a great point. And also a good reminder that even a relatively small increase multiplied across hundreds or thousands of devices adds up quickly. Now let's talk about something many people probably haven't thought about, medical equipment.
Julia, I'll admit, I hadn't much considered medical equipment until I read about helium.
I think most people associate helium with party balloons.
I certainly did, but it's interesting to note that helium is actually a critical manufacturing input. It's used in semiconductor fabrication. Helium is found in MRI systems. It's used in laboratory environments. And the supply chain disruptions are creating ripple effects across the healthcare and technology industries.
This is another hidden cost. The challenge isn't necessarily paying more. It might simply be getting what you need. Procurement IQ notes that some buyers are already facing allocations rather than normal ordering. That changes the procurement conversation completely because you can't negotiate availability. So thinking beyond IT, I think this is another important reminder. When we say technology, we don't just mean computers.
Right. It's easy to just focus on computers, but every public agency relies on technology in a larger sense. There are traffic signals, water treatment centers, emergency communication systems, security cameras, courtrooms, and digital classrooms. And now technology has become infrastructure.
And infrastructure has become increasingly dependent on global supply chains. So Abbie, time for our three questions. What's happening?
Like other commodities we've discussed, technology isn't getting any cheaper. It's getting more competitive and more expensive.
Why should buyers care?
Because you're no longer competing with only with other government agencies, right? You're competing with hyperscale cloud providers, global manufacturers, AI companies, and healthcare systems. And they're all purchasing at enormous scale.
And what's one thing buyers can do tomorrow?
I'd encourage buyers to ask suppliers an additional question. Which components in this product have the longest lead time today? Sometimes that answer might surprise you. It isn't the finished product. It's some tiny component somewhere deep in the supply chain that could disrupt your entire procurement.
It's always the tiny component, right, Abby?
It is.
So far, we've discussed trucks, buildings, and technology. And one thing keeps coming up.
Hidden costs.
Yes, not just commodity prices, but lead times, labor, transportation, supplier capacity, energy costs, and global events.
So, in our final segment, we're going to bring it all together. We'll share 5 practical strategies procurement professionals can use to navigate these market conditions. Whether you're buying technology, construction services, fleet vehicles, or everyday goods.
Today, we've covered quite a bit: transportation, construction, technology, and medical equipment. And we've talked a lot about rising prices and supply chain challenges. But I hope everyone leaves today with something more valuable than market information, and that's creating a plan.
Julia, that's a great point because procurement professionals can't control commodity markets, but we can absolutely control how we respond to them.
So, strategy one, I'll start with something that has become increasingly important over the last few years: market research. And not just checking online catalogs, but actual research. NASWA provides buyers several resources to assist with market research.
Right. And I think some of those resources that we have will be put in the chat for your reference. If lead times are changing every month, if pricing is changing, if manufacturers are shifting production, you don't want to learn that after you issue the solicitation. Or even worse, find out you didn't leave yourself enough time to properly compete a procurement.
The best buyers I know start asking questions months before they issue an RFP.
So, some market research questions that you should consider asking include what's changed since the last time maybe you competed the procurement? What's driving pricing? What concerns you most? And what product is hardest to obtain?
So, strategy number two, think beyond price. This might be today's biggest takeaway.
I agree.
The purchase price is only the beginning. When we are evaluating offers today, we're also thinking about delivery, lead times, transportation, warranty support, supplier capability, and inventory strategy. That's the hidden cost conversation we've been having today. Strategy number three. So, Abbie, let's talk about contracts.
Yeah. In today's market, rigid contracts can become difficult for both buyers and suppliers, especially in the public sector.
And what are some examples of flexibility in contracts?
Well, reasonable price adjustment provisions are a great start. Approved substitution lists, alternative delivery schedules, identifying multiple suppliers, and even including extension options are all great ways to include flexibility in your contracts.
Great ideas. So, to be clear, the goal isn't lowering standards, but instead it's building supply chain resilience in your contracts.
Right.
Strategy number four, supplier relationships has become one of my favorite procurement topics. In fact, we have an upcoming Pulse podcast on this very topic.
That's so important, Julia. Good supplier relationships aren't about giving anyone special treatment, right? They're about communication.
Absolutely. When suppliers trust you, they're more likely to tell you things like, there's a shortage coming, so order now, or here's an alternative, or here's a better approach. Strategy number five, stay curious. Abbie, I'll admit, this is my favorite slide. I couldn't help myself. Look at that face.
I'll admit, for everyone tuning in, Julia and I are both dog lovers. Just don't tell my cat that. But back to the topic of staying curious. The marketplace changes every single day. That's why it's really important to stay informed. Stay informed, ask questions, talk with your suppliers, attend conferences, and listen to your peers. Use cooperative purchasing networks, and most importantly, always learn.
Because public procurement has become one of the fastest changing professions in government.
So to wrap up, Julia, if attendees remember just one thing from today's webinar, what should it be?
I think it's this: the purchase price is only the beginning. The biggest challenge facing procurement professionals today isn't simply higher prices. It's recognizing the hidden costs that influence every procurement. As mentioned, there are transportation, labor, supplier capability, energy costs, lead times, inventory, and global events. And these cost challenges will be ongoing. As procurement professionals, we need to be prepared to deal with the long tail of increased transportation, labor, and energy costs.
I'd add one more thought. The best procurement professionals aren't the ones who predict the future. They're the ones who prepare for it.
Great point. So, Abbie, let's wrap up today's news.
Well, markets remain volatile. Finished goods are absorbing commodity pressures, and preparation is your greatest competitive advantage.
And finally, what's one thing every buyer should do tomorrow?
I would really encourage buyers to just pick one upcoming procurement and then ask yourself, what hidden costs haven't we considered yet? That one question may completely change how you approach the procurement. So let's take some time to address our questions from the audience. Looks like. All right. So, Julia, one question we have. How long do you expect these price increases to continue?
Well, hang on a second. I'll take out my Super 8 ball here and take a peek. No, in all seriousness, analysts are saying that procurement professionals should plan for at least 12 to 24 months of this level of disruption. Additionally, we've all seen this in our profession, that we become habitualized, or the new price becomes normalized. And so just think about a candy bar, for example, from 5 years ago compared to the price today. So we get used to the new price. And I think as procurement professionals, to some degree, we have to get used to this new price.
It looks like we had another question come in. How can procurement professionals balance obtaining the lowest price with managing schedule and supply chain risks? So that's a really great question. I think that's where we get into the discussion of best value doesn't always mean lowest cost. While price is important, we need to make sure that projects are getting completed on time, that we have the commodities necessary. Lowest price doesn't really mean all that much if you can't complete your projects on time, right? So it's a balance for sure.
And a shout out and acknowledgement to our fellow colleague at NASPO. Prices go up like a rocket and come down like a feather. And that is very true.
Very true.
Abbie, do we have any other questions?
Yes. So, how should procurement professionals communicate these hidden costs to agency leadership?
Would you like me to take that one?
Sure.
So I think the key there is constant communication. And especially when you're discussing with senior leadership who are probably not procurement professionals, you can't just show them the bottom line price. You need to explain what's embedded into that price. As we've discussed today, tariffs, transportation, increased labor costs, all of that combined are what make up that bottom line. But there needs to be explanation from the procurement professional to senior leadership on what makes up those prices. And again, explaining to them that plan for these prices to remain at where they're at or even higher.
Right.
So it's not always great news, but we like to travel with the facts in procurement, right?
Yes, quite. And I would just add that this is only a 30-minute webinar, right? The Procurement IQ report, which is posted on our content library, goes into all of these commodities in greater depth. So it gives you some great points that you can then communicate to your senior leadership regarding tariffs and these mill closures and labor shortages that we were discussing. That we just went over a high level overview, but to really articulate those points, I would highly recommend folks give that a deep dive.
Abbie, that's a great point. And then, of course, lots of other resources out in the marketplace, professional newspapers and others that focus on the economy. Again, when you go in to speak to leaders, to senior leadership, it's important to be able to articulate all of the challenges that are happening. One of the other nice things about Procurement IQ report is that it also is, there's some geography based into it. So Abbie happens to be in the Northeast. I'm in the Middle Plains area. And so I might be experiencing labor shortages and she may not. So that's another valuable component of the Procurement IQ report.
That's a great point. And our last question, how can procurement help departments plan further in advance? So I think to start, folks might be a little hesitant or they might not want to be ready to start a project, but as procurement professionals, it's our job to really nudge and get the project moving sooner rather than later. You can always extend a solicitation timeline. But again, like we discussed, you don't want to get into the position of you issue your RFP and then realize that there are delays because then you can get into the waters of needing to sole source or things like that. And we want to avoid that as much as possible. So communicating to your stakeholders, again, being very transparent and honest with, we're seeing a lot of volatility, a lot of market disruptions, and we would rather start this sooner rather than later to ensure that there's no disruption in your projects and to, again, ensure that the commodities and services that our communities need, that we're getting those to them in a timely manner.
Yeah, great points. And Abbie, most of the state CPOs that I've spoken to hold either a quarterly or biannually meeting with their different agencies. And that's an opportunity to look for, can we consolidate any of our purchases? Should we look at cooperative purchasing? And just look at every avenue possible, but communication and planning as much in advance is key.
Great point. So, Julia, thank you for another great discussion. It's always a pleasure.
It always is a pleasure, Abbie. And thanks to everyone for joining today. We hope this discussion helps you look at market conditions a little differently because while none of us can control commodity markets,
we all can become better prepared. We can ask better questions, and ultimately, we can make better procurement decisions.
Thanks for being with us today.
And we'll see you next quarter. And this recording will be posted on our website shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, these are recording this.
Are we on air? Are we off?